My son and his new wife slowly seized my beloved family bakery, replacing quality with mass production and trying to push me out entirely. I refused to yield, secretly starting a new, authentic bakery with loyal staff, ultimately winning a legal battle and reclaiming my legacy through true craftsmanship. Ever faced a situation where something you built was taken from you? Share your story and thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for stories. The aroma of warm sourdough and sweet cinnamon rolls used to be the lifeblood of Della's Delights, clinging to every surface like a comforting embrace. For 40 years, the scent of yeast and sugar had been my constant companion, a symphony of warmth and well-being. But lately, a sharp, sterile scent of fresh paint and an almost imperceptible hint of corporate regret had begun to creep in, chilling the very soul of the place. I stood by the ancient Hobart mixer, its chrome gleaming, a silent, weighty testament to decades of tireless kneading and meticulous baking. My hands, gnarled with the wisdom of 1,000 doughs, instinctively reached for the flour sack, a familiar ritual that had grounded me through joys and sorrows alike. But the sack itself was different now, a new, impersonal brand, delivered by a young man I didn't recognize, too busy with his phone to even make eye contact. "Excuse me, ma'am," he'd mumbled, barely glancing my way. "Deliveries go through the side door now, orders are all digital." Digital. Everything was digital since David, my only son, took the reins. "Della, you look thoughtful," a voice chirped, snapping me back to the present. It was Tiffany, David's new wife, a whirlwind of designer clothes and crisp business jargon. She glided into the bakery, not smelling of yeast and sugar, but of expensive perfume and ambition. She held a tablet, its screen glowing with sterile charts and graphs, the kind of data-driven analysis that felt utterly foreign to the heart and soul of a bakery. "Just admiring the old girl," I said, patting the mixer's cold metal frame. "She's seen a lot of changes." Tiffany's smile was polite, almost rehearsed, a veneer of charm over a core of steel. "Progress, Della, we're modernizing. David and I have such big plans for Della's Delights. National expansion, franchising the works. Imagine a Della's Delights on every corner, a household name." She gestured grandly to the freshly painted walls, a stark, clinical white that had replaced the cozy, butter-yellow hue I'd painstakingly chosen years ago, a color that always reminded me of warm butter and golden crusts. "The new color palette really brightens the space, don't you think? And this minimalist approach, it's what the market demands. Our consultants are very clear on that." I looked at the bare walls, now devoid of the framed photos of my parents, my grandparents, and even a youthful me, all smiling amidst flour dust and rising bread. They were all gone, packed away in boxes I hadn't dared to open, lest I truly confront the extent of the purge. "It's certainly different," I conceded, my voice flat, tasting the metallic tang of unspoken bitterness. "But what about the feeling, the warmth, the sense of home our customers have always loved?" Tiffany laughed, a brittle sound that grated on my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Feeling is subjective, Della. We're focusing on efficiency and brand recognition. The Della's Delights experience will be uniform across all locations. That's how you scale a business. We're talking about massive growth potential. Imagine, Della, your name, or rather the brand of your name, on every corner." Her words felt like sandpaper, rubbing away at the very essence of what I had built, desecrating the decades of love and labor. My name wasn't a brand. It was my identity, my legacy, etched into every loaf of bread, every pastry, every customer's satisfied smile. It was a promise of quality, a testament to tradition. Just then, David walked in, his suit impeccably tailored, a stark contrast to the flour-dusted aprons I still wore, almost like a uniform of defiance. He gave me a quick, distracted nod, his eyes already scanning the newly organized shelves. "Mom, Tiffany, everything on schedule." He no longer called me Della, my dear, or Mama, not since Tiffany entered the picture 6 months ago and the whispers of modernization turned into deafening roars of change. He'd inherited my keen business sense, my drive, my almost obsessive attention to detail, but somewhere along the way, he'd lost the heart I'd poured into him, the very soul that infused our bakery with its unique magic. He used to be so passionate about the craft, about the honest joy of feeding people. "The new display cases arrive tomorrow," Tiffany announced, her eyes sparkling with cold, calculated enthusiasm. "And the first batch of the pre-made dough shipments comes in next week. We'll finally be rid of that time-consuming scratch baking." My stomach plummeted. Pre-made dough. That was the core of my bakery's success, the secret to our renowned artisanal bread, the reason people drove miles out of their way. Every morning for 40 years I had been here before dawn, my hands buried in flour and water, transforming simple ingredients into edible art, coaxing life out of inert matter. This was not just a business, it was a devotion, a tangible connection to the earth and the hands that worked it. Pre-made dough, I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper, tasting the dust of a forgotten dream. David, you can't be serious, that's not us, that's not Della's Delights. Our customers come here for the authentic, the handcrafted, the taste of tradition. They come for my bread, David, not some mass-produced imitation. David sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, an impatient gesture that felt like a dismissal. Mom, we've discussed this, it's about streamlining operations. Labor costs are through the roof. We need consistency, efficiency. This old-fashioned way of doing things, it's just not sustainable for a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Multi-million-dollar enterprise. He used to talk about the joy of baking, the smiles on customers' faces when they took that first bite of a warm croissant. Now, it was all about figures and scalability, about abstract growth instead of tangible goodness. Tiffany stepped in, her voice annoyingly smooth like polished chrome. Della, we appreciate your traditional approach, truly. It built the foundation, but the market has evolved. We need to evolve with it or be left behind. Left behind? The words echoed in my mind, a chilling premonition. Was I, Della, the very heart of this bakery, the very essence of its charm and success, about to be left behind in my own creation? I looked at David, searching for a flicker of the boy who used to sneak warm croissants from the cooling racks, his face dusted with powdered sugar, his eyes wide with innocent delight. There was only a businessman now, a stranger in his father's shoes, his gaze cold and calculating, devoid of sentiment. As they walked away, discussing marketing strategies and profit margins in hushed, conspiratorial tones, I was left alone with the silent mixer, the stark white walls, and the unsettling truth that the sweet scent of Della's Delights was slowly, inexorably, being replaced by the bitter tang of betrayal. The bakery, once my sanctuary, my second home, now felt like a battleground, and I, the matriarch, was suddenly an outsider in my own domain. The fight was just beginning, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it wouldn't be a fair one. My hands, once accustomed to shaping dough, now felt ready to grip something much sharper, the truth. The next few weeks felt like a slow, agonizing suffocation. Every morning I arrived at Della's Delights to find more changes, each one a fresh cut, a deliberate erasure of the past. The rustic wooden shelves, handcrafted by my late husband, Arthur, with such loving care, were replaced by sleek, illuminated glass cases that showcased uniform, sterile products. The cozy seating area with mismatched antique chairs, where customers had lingered over coffee and conversation for decades, sharing stories and laughter, was now filled with uniform, uncomfortable chrome stools, designed for quick turnover, not lingering enjoyment. It felt less like a beloved neighborhood bakery and more like a sterile, modern art installation, a stark, uncomfortable monument to efficiency. My longtime staff, the bakers and counter help who had been with me for years, people I considered family, began to avoid my gaze. Their smiles, once genuine and warm, now seemed strained, laced with an unspoken apology, a silent plea for understanding. They were caught between their loyalty to me and the crushing weight of new management's demands. They knew what was happening, and it pained them as much as it pained me. One Tuesday morning, I found Miguel, our head baker for 20 years, meticulously cleaning the new industrial proofing oven, its massive, impersonal form a stark contrast to the small, well-loved ovens of old. His usual cheerful whistling, a comforting melody that had always filled the bakery at dawn, was absent. Miguel had started with me as a teenager, fresh off the boat, learning to shape baguettes under my watchful eye. We had shared countless sunrises, flour-dusted jokes, and the quiet satisfaction of perfect crusts. He was a son to me as much as David was. Miguel, I began, my voice soft, trying to break through the wall of silence he'd erected. What's going on? You seem distant. Everything all right? He flinched, almost dropping his rag, his hands shaking slightly. Della, he said, turning, his dark eyes shadowed with worry, betraying the turmoil within him. Things are changing so fast. David and Tiffany, they're pushing so hard, it's not the same. He lowered his voice, glancing nervously towards the office door as if the very walls had ears. They're bringing in new people, Della. Consultants, they call them, young, sharp, all about data and metrics, and they've been talking to us about restructuring, about new procedures. They say the old ways are inefficient, that our methods are obsolete. My heart ached. Inefficient, Miguel, our old ways made this bakery what it is. Our customers come here for the quality, for the taste that comes from passion, not just profit margins. They appreciate the handcrafted touch, the uniqueness. Miguel nodded, his expression grim, a mirror of my own despair. I know, Della, but they've made it clear, adapt or well, they didn't say or else, but the implication is there. They've been talking about early retirement packages, about streamlining the staff, about replacing us with automated processes. The insidious nature of their plan began to unfold, chillingly clear. They weren't just changing the decor or the equipment. They were dismantling the very human fabric of the bakery, systematically eroding the loyalties and relationships that had held it together for decades. They were replacing passion with procedure, loyalty with fear, artistry with automation. Have they said anything directly to you, Miguel? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, dread pooling in my stomach. He hesitated, then sighed, defeat etched on his face. They offered me a management training program in another city, far away, said it was a great opportunity for growth for my future. But I don't want to leave, Della. This is my home, this is our home, my family is here, my life is here. His words confirmed my worst fears. They were trying to systematically remove anyone who might stand in their way, anyone loyal to me and the bakery's true essence, anyone who remembered the soul of Della's delights. Later that week, I overheard a hushed conversation between David and Tiffany in the office, the door slightly ajar, their voices carrying through the quiet bakery. She just doesn't get it, David, Tiffany's voice, sharp and impatient, cut through the sounds of the bakery. She's stuck in the past. This artisanal charm is holding us back. We need to be ruthless. The legacy aspect is just a marketing gimmick, not a business model. We can spin it however we want for the franchisees. David's response was low, almost inaudible, but I caught fragments. Be sensitive, she's my mother. Eventually she'll understand. Early retirement for Della, it's for the best. My stomach churned, a bitter bile rising in my throat. Early retirement, for me, in my own bakery. The place where I had literally spent my entire adult life, where I had cradled my babies in one arm while kneading dough with the other, rocking them gently with the rhythm of my work. They saw me as an obstacle, a sentimental old woman who needed to be politely, but firmly, pushed aside, removed from the picture entirely. The next day, a formal memo appeared on the staff bulletin board. It was an announcement of a new performance review system, complete with quarterly targets and metrics for efficiency and throughput. It was clearly designed to weed out the long-term, experienced staff who valued quality over speed, and to replace them with younger, more compliant employees who would follow instructions without question. It was a betrayal not just of me, but of the very people who had made this bakery what it was. I confronted David later that afternoon, my voice trembling with suppressed fury, a raw emotion that I rarely allowed myself to show. What is this, David? A performance review for people who have given their lives to this bakery. Miguel, Ana, Carlos, their family. They built this place with me, brick by brick, loaf by loaf. David leaned back in his chair, a weary, almost bored expression on his face, as if I were a particularly tiresome child. Mom, please, this is standard corporate procedure. We need to ensure everyone is pulling their weight. We can't afford sentimental attachments when we're building an empire. This is the big leagues now. His eyes, once so full of warmth and love for me, now held a cold, calculating glint. He truly saw me as a hurdle to his grand ambitions, an emotional inconvenience to be managed. An empire built on shortcuts and pre-made dough, I retorted, my voice rising, trembling with indignation. This isn't an empire, David, it's a factory. You're stripping away everything that made Della's Delight special. You're destroying its soul, its very identity. You're turning a beloved institution into a cheap imitation. He stood up, towering over me, his face hardening. I'm securing its future, Mom. Your generation had its time. This is my time now. And if you can't get on board, then maybe it's time for you to consider taking a back seat. A very long back seat. The implication hung heavy in the air. He wasn't just suggesting, he was commanding. He was telling me, his mother, that I was no longer welcome in the very home I had created, the legacy I had so painstakingly built for him. As he turned and walked away, dismissing me like a troublesome employee, a cold resolve settled in my heart. The sweetness of my life's work was being turned to ash, but I was not one to crumble. They wanted a battle. They would get one. Della, was not just a baker. I was a matriarch, a survivor, and I knew how to fight for what was mine. The whispers of disloyalty had become a roar, and I would not be silenced. The bitter taste of betrayal was a fuel, not a poison. The realization that my own son, David, was actively trying to erase me from the very fabric of Della's delights was a bitter pill to swallow, one that burned going down. The forced smiles from some of my staff, the awkward silences that followed my questions, and the growing chasm between David and me became unbearable. Each morning, stepping into the transformed bakery felt like entering a stranger's house, a place devoid of the comforting familiarity I had always known. The scent of genuine warmth, of rising yeast and baking bread, was gone, replaced by the faint, artificial aroma of store-bought bread and the metallic tang of new, impersonal equipment. I watched as Tiffany paraded potential franchisees through the aisles, their expressions a mix of calculated interest and mild disdain for the few remaining elements of the old charm, the little imperfections that made us unique. Imagine, Tiffany would gush, her voice a sales pitch, Della's delights in every major city. We're revolutionizing the bakery industry, a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. One afternoon, a large delivery truck pulled up, its side emblazoned with the logo of a national food supply chain. Men began unloading massive pallets of prepackaged, frozen dough, hundreds of boxes filled with the pale, lifeless lumps that were meant to replace the living, breathing dough I had nurtured for decades. It was the final straw. I watched, my hands trembling with a mix of fury and despair, as the familiar rhythm of our bakers, once kneading fresh batches every few hours, was replaced by the clatter of machines and the rustle of plastic packaging. My heart ached for the lost artistry, the tradition that was being callously discarded for the sake of efficiency and profit. "This is a disgrace, David," I exclaimed, my voice hoarse, echoing through the now cavernous space. "You're selling out everything we built. This isn't baking, it's assembly line food. You're destroying the very soul of this place." David, caught off guard as he signed a delivery manifest, frowned, his brow furrowed with irritation. "Mom, keep your voice down. This is progress. We're expanding. You can't make thousands of loaves a day with a couple of old mixers and a handful of sentimental bakers. We have to automate, Mom, to scale." His words were like a physical blow. He didn't just dismiss my work. He insulted the very dedication of the people who had stood by me for decades, the craft that had been passed down through generations. Later that day, I found Miguel, our head baker, standing by the new proofing oven, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of defeat. He held a small, crumpled piece of paper in his hand. "Della," he said, his voice barely a whisper devoid of its usual vibrancy, "they've cut my hours. Said it's due to increased efficiency with the new dough. And Ana and Carlos, their hours are cut too. They're effectively forcing us out, Della. We're being replaced by machines and plastic bags." A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach, chilling me to the bone. This wasn't just about money, it was about pride, about the dignity of honest work, about the bonds of loyalty. David and Tiffany were systematically dismantling my family, piece by agonizing piece, destroying not just a business but a community. That evening, I sat alone in my small kitchen, the silence deafening, punctuated only by the ticking of the old wall clock. For 40 years, my life had revolved around the bakery, its joys, its challenges, its comforting routines. Now it was being ripped away, leaving a gaping void, a raw wound. I thought of my late husband, Arthur, who had helped me open Della's delights, his strong hands building the shelves, his warm smile greeting every customer. He would be heartbroken to see what was happening. His legacy, our legacy, was being trampled under the heavy boots of corporate greed. But then, a flicker, a tiny spark of defiance in the oppressive darkness. Arthur had always told me, "Della, you're like sourdough, the longer you rest, the stronger you become, and the more sour you get when someone tries to spoil you." That night, the sadness began to transform into a quiet, simmering anger, a resolve as firm as a well-proofed loaf. I wasn't going to just sit back and watch them destroy my life's work. I was Della, and I was a baker. I knew how to turn simple ingredients into something extraordinary, and I knew how to fight. The next morning, instead of heading straight to Della's Delights, I made a detour. My first stop was the community library. I spent hours poring over dusty books on small business law, intellectual property, and community outreach. I learned about local zoning laws, historical preservation societies, and grants for independent businesses. The idea began to form, slowly at first, then gaining momentum, a seed of retaliation, a plan to reclaim what was truly mine. I wouldn't fight them for their version of Della's delights. I would build my own, a truer, purer version. My second stop was a small, independent coffee shop on the edge of town, a place I rarely visited, but knew was run by a tenacious young woman named Chloe. Chloe was a fierce advocate for local businesses and had a reputation for being shrewd and resourceful, a whirlwind of energy and ideas. When I walked in, she greeted me with a warm, genuine smile, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Della, what a surprise, haven't seen you here in ages, what brings you to my humble abode?" "Chloe," I said, a faint smile touching my lips, "I need your advice, and perhaps your help. I'm thinking of starting something new." I explained the situation at the bakery, the slow, agonizing erosion of quality, the deliberate marginalization of me and my loyal staff, the impending mass production. Chloe listened intently, her expression hardening with each detail, her own passion for local craftsmanship clearly resonating with my plight. "That's despicable, Della," she said, shaking her head, her voice filled with genuine outrage. "They're ruining a local institution, a place people loved." "Exactly," I said, leaning forward, a newfound determination hardening my features. "And I don't intend to let them." I outlined my nascent idea. A small, artisanal bakery focusing on traditional methods and quality ingredients, perhaps a pop-up initially, something small and manageable, a true Della's Delights in spirit. Chloe's eyes lit up, seeing the potential, the poetry in my idea. "A pop-up? Brilliant. We could even host you here on weekends, use our kitchen after hours. It would be a perfect synergy, our coffee, your bread." A wave of relief, warm and comforting, washed over me. It wasn't just a dream, it was a possibility, a tangible path forward. Chloe was a whirlwind of ideas, connecting me with local food critics, small business incubators, and even a retired zoning official who owed her a favor. The path ahead was daunting, fraught with uncertainty, but for the first time in months I felt a flicker of hope, a resurgence of my old self, the Della who faced challenges head-on. The seed of retaliation had been planted, and it was ready to grow. The bitterness of betrayal still lingered, a phantom taste, but beneath it, the sweet anticipation of a new beginning began to rise, strong and undeniable. With Chloe's enthusiastic support, the seed of retaliation began to sprout, reaching for the light. My mornings were no longer filled with the dread of stepping into David and Tiffany's sterile, corporate Della's Delights. Instead, I spent hours poring over legal documents, consulting with Chloe's contacts, and meticulously mapping out a new future. I was like a baker, measuring ingredients for a new recipe, each step precise and deliberate, every decision weighed carefully. My first covert move was to reach out to Anna and Carlos, two of my most loyal employees, their faces etched into the very history of Della's Delights. Anna had been with me for 30 years, her laugh as infectious as her perfectly braided challah. Carlos, a quiet man of immense skill, had overseen the ovens for 25, his timing impeccable, his understanding of dough almost spiritual. They were more than employees, they were family, a core part of the soul of the bakery. I invited them to my home for coffee, making sure it was on a day when David and Tiffany were conveniently out of town at a franchise development conference in another state, their minds focused on global domination, oblivious to the small revolution brewing back home. As I poured them mugs of steaming coffee, the rich aroma filling my small kitchen, I saw the weariness in their eyes, the subtle signs of disillusionment, the silent burdens they carried. "How are things at the bakery?" I asked, my voice gentle, not wanting to press but needing to know. Anna sighed, stirring her coffee slowly, her gaze fixed on the steam rising from her mug. "It's not the same, Della, the joy is gone. They rush us, they criticize our methods. They even told me my braids are too rustic for the new brand, can you believe it?" Carlos nodded grimly, his face a silent testament to the changes. "And the dough, it's like working with plastic. No life in it. The customers, they notice, they say the bread doesn't taste the same, but David and Tiffany just say they're adjusting to the new flavors, blaming the customers for not appreciating their progress." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm not giving up on baking," I told them, watching their expressions for any hint of doubt or despair. "Not Della's way, I'm thinking of starting something small, a new bakery, maybe a pop-up at first. Hand-kneaded, fresh ingredients, the way we used to do it. The way true Della's Delights used to be." Their eyes widened, a flicker of hope replacing the weariness, a spark igniting in the depths of their tired souls. But Della, Anna began, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and caution. Where and how won't David and Tiffany? That's where you come in, I said, my gaze steady, unwavering. I need your help, your expertise, your loyalty. It would be a silent rebellion at first, working on our days off after hours, perhaps at Chloe's coffee shop kitchen. No one can know, not yet, not David, not Tiffany, not a soul outside this room. It has to be our secret, our quiet stand. They looked at each other, then back at me, a silent conversation passing between them. A slow smile spread across Anna's face, then Carlo's. The lines of worry around their eyes softened, replaced by a glint of defiance. "You're serious, Della?" Carlos asked, a spark in his quiet eyes, a renewed sense of purpose. "More serious than I've ever been," I affirmed, my voice ringing with conviction. "Are you with me?" "Always, Della," Anna said, her voice thick with emotion, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Always, we miss the old ways, Della." "We miss you?" Carlos simply nodded, a firm, determined look on his face, his quiet demeanor masking a fierce loyalty. In that moment the old team was reformed, a silent pact sealed over steaming coffee cups, a conspiracy of crumbs and courage. The planning was meticulous, shrouded in secrecy, every step taken with utmost caution. We used Chloe's coffee shop kitchen on evenings and weekends, its industrial ovens a welcome change from the unfamiliar, sterile equipment at Della's Delights. Chloe herself became an invaluable ally, a strategist and a connector, helping us source the best local ingredients, connecting us with farmers and millers who remembered my reputation for quality, who understood the difference between a mass-produced product and a labor of love. We experimented with old recipes, tweaked them slightly, and rediscovered the joy of working with dough that responded to our touch, rising with life and promise, a testament to the magic that happens when skilled hands meet quality ingredients. The aroma of truly fresh bread, of cinnamon and sugar and butter, filled Chloe's kitchen, a scent I hadn't smelled in months, a balm to my soul. Our first pop-up was announced subtly, through word of mouth and a few discreet social media posts from Chloe, who crafted them with artful vagueness. "A taste of the good old days," her flyers read. "Traditional recipes, handcrafted with love. Find us at the Saturday Farmers Market." We decided on a prime spot at the bustling local farmers market on a crisp Saturday morning, a place where people valued local artisanal goods. The morning of the market, I felt a familiar thrill course through me, a mixture of nerves and exhilaration, the same feeling I had on the very first day I opened Della's Delights. We set up our small booth, a simple wooden table covered with a checkered cloth, piled high with freshly baked sourdough loaves, glistening apple tarts, and fragrant cinnamon buns, each one a testament to our renewed commitment to quality. There was no flashy branding, no corporate logos, just a small hand-painted wooden sign, "Della's Home Baked." As the market opened, I braced myself for a slow start, for the indifference of strangers. But then a familiar face appeared in the crowd. It was Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, elderly woman who had been coming to the bakery since I first opened, her eyes widening as she recognized me. "Della, oh Della, it's really you. I thought you'd retired. I haven't seen you behind the counter at the bakery lately. And the bread, it's just not the same, dear. It tastes so manufactured now." She picked up a sourdough loaf, bringing it to her nose, her eyes closing in bliss. This is the smell I remember. This is real bread, Della." Word spread quickly, carried on the wind like the scent of our freshly baked goods. Customers, many of whom had stopped frequenting Della's Delights because of the declining quality, flocked to our stall. They recognized the taste, the texture, the undeniable quality that had been missing from their lives. "This is real bread, Della," one man declared, his eyes shining with appreciation. "Thank you for bringing it back. We missed you." By noon, we had sold out, every loaf, every pastry gone. The joy on Anna and Carlo's faces was palpable, mirroring my own, a shared triumph. We had proved it. There was a demand for authentic, quality baking, a hunger for something real in a world of imitations. Our silent rebellion was a resounding success, a quiet roar that echoed through the market. News of our pop-up, fueled by glowing reviews from word of mouth and Chloe's online network, began to circulate. It reached the ears of local food critics, and soon a small, independent newspaper ran a feature, "Della Returns. The true taste of city name baking is back." The article praised our traditional methods, our commitment to quality, and subtly highlighted the stark contrast with the corporate direction of the larger Della's Delights, carefully using coded language that everyone understood. David and Tiffany, however, remained blissfully oblivious, too consumed by their grand expansion plans and frantic franchise meetings in distant cities. They were so focused on the future, on the abstract concept of a national empire, that they failed to notice the silent revolution brewing right under their noses. A rebellion kneaded with love and defiance, rising slowly but surely, destined to prove that true quality, like a well-proofed dough, would always find its way to the surface. My heart swelled with a quiet pride. I was no longer Della, the fading matriarch, the discarded relic. I was Della, the baker, reclaiming my legacy one delicious loaf at a time. The bitter taste was fading, replaced by the sweet scent of a triumphant return, a quiet revolution of flour and fire. The newspaper article was the spark that ignited the full-blown war. David and Tiffany's initial, blustery threats of lawsuits quickly materialized into actual legal documents, served to me by a grim-faced process server right on my doorstep, a flimsy white envelope containing their furious accusations. They accused me of defamation, unfair competition, and maliciously attempting to damage their business. The irony was not lost on me. They were destroying my legacy, the very thing they claimed to be upholding, and then suing me for trying to preserve it. My initial fear, a fleeting flutter in my chest, quickly transformed into a fierce resolve. I wasn't just fighting for my reputation, I was fighting for the very soul of Della's Delights, for every memory baked into its walls, for every customer who had found comfort in its taste. I was fighting for truth itself. My first call was to Chloe, who immediately connected me with her cousin, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer named Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, with her intelligent eyes, an astute gaze that seemed to penetrate through facades, and her calm, collected demeanor, listened intently as I laid out the whole story. I recounted the usurpation of the bakery, the systematic dismantling of my methods, the cruel dismissal of loyal staff, and David and Tiffany's relentless pursuit of profit over quality, their callous disregard for tradition. I showed her the old recipe books, filled with my mother's handwritten notes, stained with flour and love, and even old newspaper clippings praising the original Della's Delights, testaments to its long-standing reputation. "They're claiming unfair competition," Eleanor said, flipping through the documents with an almost casual efficiency, her mind already working, dissecting their arguments. "But you're operating under a different name, on a different scale. More importantly, they've fundamentally altered the product and the brand identity. They're no longer truly Della's Delights in the way the public understood it for decades. That opens up a whole new line of argument, Della." She explained, in clear, concise terms, that their case was weak, relying on proving that my pop-up was intentionally and maliciously undermining their new business model, rather than simply offering a superior product that resonated with the community. We can argue that their own actions, their shift to inferior ingredients and mass production, led to a natural decline in customer satisfaction, and your new venture simply filled a void they created, Eleanor stated, her voice confident and steady, radiating assurance. Furthermore, the very name Della's Delights carries a strong association with you and your specific baking style, your reputation. When they changed that style, when they abandoned the authenticity, they diluted the very brand they inherited. We can even argue consumer confusion, that customers believed their bakery was still your bakery, and were misled by the continued use of the name. The legal proceedings began. David and Tiffany, represented by a high-powered, expensive law firm, were arrogant and dismissive, confident that their vast financial might would crush my small, independent efforts. They saw me as a minor annoyance, a sentimental old woman clinging to the past. During depositions, they painted me as a bitter, vengeful old woman unable to accept progress and innovation. Mrs. Foster, their lawyer, a slick, condescending man named Mr. Harrison, asked, his voice dripping with insinuation, "Isn't it true that you've been actively trying to disparage Della's Delights to customers? Spreading rumors, perhaps?" "I've been baking bread, Mr. Harrison," I replied calmly, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. "And if the truth about the quality of that bread disparages their business, then perhaps the problem isn't with my baking but with theirs. People have taste, Mr. Harrison, and they know the difference between real and imitation." Eleanor was a formidable advocate, a force of nature in the courtroom. She presented overwhelming evidence of David and Tiffany's drastic changes. The shift to pre-made dough, the new, inferior ingredients, the shocking decline in customer reviews, which Chloe had meticulously collected from various online platforms, an undeniable mountain of data. She brought in expert witnesses. A renowned food historian who testified about the importance of artisanal baking traditions and the integrity of a true bakery, and a branding expert who explained how the Della's Delights name was intrinsically linked to my personal reputation for quality and craftsmanship. She even had former long-term employees like Miguel quietly provide affidavits describing the pressure to compromise quality, the demoralizing impact of the new management, and the forced reduction of their hours. The turning point came when a leaner presented internal memos from David and Tiffany's company, obtained through legal discovery, outlining their strategies to phase out traditional baking methods and minimize the influence of legacy personnel. One memo, in particular, discussed strategically diminishing the elder Della's involvement to avoid sentimental resistance to modernization, even suggesting ways to subtly nudge me towards early retirement. It was a cold, calculated plan to remove me entirely, to erase my very existence from the business I built. When confronted with these damning documents, David and Tiffany looked visibly shaken, their confident demeanor cracking, their faces paling under the harsh courtroom lights. Mr. Harrison, their slick lawyer, tried to dismiss them as standard corporate jargon, but the judge, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for fairness and an acute sense of justice, saw through it. The judge looked at David and Tiffany with a stern, disapproving expression, her voice cutting through the tense silence of the courtroom. "It appears," she stated, her words carrying the weight of authority, "that the defendants took a well-established family business, significantly altered its core product and brand identity, and then sought to silence the original founder when her new, independent venture naturally appealed to customers seeking the quality they once associated with the original name. This court is not convinced that Mrs. Foster's actions constitute malicious, unfair competition. Rather, it appears to be a legitimate and understandable response to a perceived decline in a beloved community institution, a defense of an established reputation." She didn't rule immediately, but the tenor of the hearing had shifted dramatically in my favor. David and Tiffany, who had entered the courtroom with an air of assured victory, their heads held high, left looking defeated and grim-faced, their shoulders slumped. The legal battle was far from over, but the tides had turned dramatically and irrevocably. I felt a surge of quiet triumph, a deep satisfaction that resonated in my bones. They had underestimated me, dismissed me as a relic. But I was Della the baker, and I was proving that a legacy built on integrity and passion, once diluted, could be reclaimed, and that true quality, like a well-proofed dough, would always stand the test of scrutiny. The gathering storm was upon us, and I was ready to weather it, my hands, once covered in flour, now gripping the scales of justice, ready to weigh truth against ambition. The bitter taste of betrayal was giving way to the sweet tang of impending victory. The judge's unofficial statements during the last hearing sent a clear, unmistakable message, and the legal landscape shifted dramatically in my favor. David and Tiffany, once so confident, now looked visibly frayed, their composed exteriors cracking under the immense pressure. Their expensive lawyers, recognizing the futility of their position as their case crumbled around them, started to push for a settlement. But I was not interested in a quick resolution, a quiet handshake. I wanted justice, a clear vindication of my name and my life's work. The Della's Delights they were running was a hollow shell, a fraudulent imitation, and I intended to expose that truth to the fullest extent of the law, for the sake of every customer they misled, every tradition they disrespected. The pressure mounted on David and Tiffany, relentless and unforgiving. Reports from their investors indicated growing concern about the negative press, the plummeting sales, and the escalating legal costs. Sales at their Della's Delights locations were plummeting, a dramatic nosedive as customers, swayed by Sarah Hayes's scathing review and the ever-louder hum of word of mouth, flocked to my small, artisanal Della's home-baked pop-ups. We were consistently selling out, often within hours of opening, and the waiting lists for our special orders grew longer each week, a testament to the community's hunger for genuine quality. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I was kneading a fresh batch of sourdough at Chloe's kitchen, the familiar rhythm of my hands a calming balm, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered anyway. It was David. His voice was strained, devoid of its usual arrogance, tinged with a desperation I had never heard before. Mom, he began, his voice hoarse, almost breaking, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. We can't afford to keep fighting this, we're losing everything. You started this, David, I replied, my hands still working the dough, my voice calm but firm, rooted in the truth of the situation. You decided to dismantle everything I built. You decided my legacy was worth less than your profit margins, less than your grand corporate ambitions. But we're losing everything, he pleaded, the desperation clear now. The investors are pulling out, she's a wreck. She's screaming at me, Mom, she's threatening to leave. And what about me, David? I asked, my voice rising slightly, the raw pain of betrayal surfacing for a moment. What about my life's work? What about the good name you dragged through the mud for your own selfish gain? What about the loyal employees you discarded like old rags, the traditions you scoffed at? There was a long silence on the other end, punctuated only by his ragged breathing. I didn't think it would go this far, he finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper laced with a genuine if belated remorse. Tiffany, she had all these plans. She said we could be rich, famous, that we could be giants of the industry. I wanted to make you proud, Mom. I thought this was the way to do it. You wanted to make yourself rich and famous, David. I corrected him, my voice firm, cutting through his excuses. And you confused my pride with your ambition. They are very different things, David, very different. He started to cry, a raw, broken sound that momentarily softened my resolve, a poignant echo of the little boy who used to cling to my apron strings. Mom, please, just drop the lawsuit. We'll give you a percentage, a consulting fee, anything, we just need this to stop. It's not about the money, David, I said, the hardness returning to my voice, the memory of their callous actions hardening my heart. It's about what's right, it's about integrity, something you seem to have forgotten in your blind pursuit of wealth. I hung up, my heart heavy but resolute. The reckoning was here, and he had to face it on his own terms without my intervention. The final court hearing was a somber affair, a stark contrast to the earlier, more volatile sessions. David and Tiffany sat opposite me, their faces pale and drawn, their usual confident swagger replaced by visible defeat. Their high-priced lawyer, Mr. Harrison, looked utterly deflated, like a soufflé that had fallen, simply stating his intent to withdraw. Eleanor presented our final arguments, a powerful summation of their systematic deceit and my unwavering commitment to quality and tradition. She even brought in a couple of my most loyal customers, like Martha, to testify about the undeniable difference in quality between the original and the new Della's Delights, their heartfelt words far more convincing than any legal jargon. When it was time for David and Tiffany's defense, Mr. Harrison simply stated, his voice devoid of any enthusiasm, Your Honor, in light of the overwhelming evidence presented by the plaintiff, and recognizing the significant changes made to the original business model of Della's Delights, we are no longer able to effectively argue against the claims of consumer confusion and dilution of brand integrity. My clients regretfully request permission to withdraw their counterclaims and are prepared to discuss a final settlement guided by the court's discretion. The judge, her expression unreadable, a portrait of calm authority, delivered her verdict. She found unequivocally in my favor, ruling that David and Tiffany had indeed fundamentally altered the Della's Delights brand to such an extent that my new venture did not constitute unfair competition. She also awarded me a significant sum for damages, acknowledging the emotional distress and professional harm caused by their actions, the years of pain and struggle they had inflicted. More importantly, she ruled that the Della's Delights name as a distinct brand was inextricably linked to my original recipes and traditional methods. She strongly suggested that if David and Tiffany wished to continue operating under the name, they would need to return to the original methods or risk further legal action, effectively rendering their entire modernization plan useless. It was a complete and utter victory, a vindication of everything I believed in. The moment the gavel fell, a wave of profound relief washed over me, a release I hadn't known I was carrying. It wasn't just about winning a lawsuit. It was about reclaiming my identity, my legacy, and my peace. David and Tiffany looked utterly broken, their faces ashen. They had built an empire on sand, and it had finally crumbled, burying their dreams beneath its weight. They left the courtroom in silence, their grand ambitions shattered, their expensive clothes no longer able to hide their defeat. The unraveling continued in the weeks that followed. The new Della's Delights locations began to close one by one, unable to sustain themselves without investment and with a now irredeemably tarnished reputation. David and Tiffany eventually filed for bankruptcy, their dream of a national bakery chain a distant, bitter memory, a stark reminder of the cost of greed. The news spread through the community like wildfire, a story of justice served, of truth prevailing. The true taste of Della's delights had won, proving that authenticity always triumphs over imitation. I, Della the baker, had faced down the greed and ambition that threatened to destroy my life's work, and I had emerged victorious, proving that integrity, like a perfectly baked loaf, would always rise to the top. The reckoning had come, and justice, as satisfying as the first bite of warm sourdough, had finally been served. With the legal battle definitively behind me, a profound sense of peace, a calm that resonated deep within my bones, settled over my life. The air felt lighter, the oppressive burden I'd carried for so long finally lifted. The Della's delights that David and Tiffany had tried to build was truly gone, its sterile storefronts now vacant, silent monuments to their misguided ambition and ultimate failure. My own small venture, Della's Home Baked, however, was thriving, blooming in the newfound freedom. The community, invigorated by my victory and eager for authentic flavors, embraced us wholeheartedly, their loyalty a comforting blanket. Our pop-ups at Chloe's coffee shop and the farmers market were wildly popular, consistently drawing crowds, and the local newspaper continued to sing our praises, referring to me as the undisputed Queen of Dough, a title that brought a soft smile to my lips. One crisp autumn morning, a few months after the verdict, I stood in what would soon be the permanent home of Della's Home Baked. It was a charming, slightly run-down building on a quiet side street, just a few blocks from where Della's Delights had first opened decades ago. The old bakery had become a symbol of what I had lost, of the betrayal and the pain, but this new space was a vibrant testament to what I had found. My own strength, my unwavering passion, and a community that genuinely valued quality and integrity. The air inside smelled of dust and old wood, but already I could envision the warm, inviting aroma of fresh bread filling every corner, transforming it into a haven. Miguel, Ana, and Carlos were there, their faces beaming with genuine joy and excitement as they helped me scrub floors, paint walls, and carry in the familiar, comforting equipment from our pop-up. Their loyalty had been unshakable, a steadfast anchor in the storm, and now they were an integral, celebrated part of this new beginning, true partners in a shared dream. Della, Ana said, wiping a smudge of paint from her cheek, her eyes twinkling, "This feels right. This feels like coming home, truly. This is where the real magic will happen." Carlos nodded, his quiet smile conveying more than words, his hands already smoothing the countertop. "The bread will taste even better in here, Della. It'll have heart, it'll have soul. It'll be the Della's Delights we all remember." Their words filled me with a quiet, profound joy, a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in too long. We weren't just building a bakery, we were rebuilding a family, a legacy rooted in genuine connection, shared passion, and unwavering principles. The grand opening of Della's Home Baked was a joyous, bustling affair. The line stretched down the block, a mix of familiar faces, customers who had supported me for decades, and curious newcomers, drawn by the buzz and the promise of authentic baking. Sarah Hayes, the food critic, was there, a satisfied, knowing smile on her face as she sampled a cinnamon roll, her eyes closing in appreciation. Chloe, beaming with pride, her hands sticky from pouring coffee for the waiting crowd, kept giving me enthusiastic thumbs-ups from behind the counter. The rich, comforting scent of real, artisanal bread, the kind made with love and skill, permeated the entire block, a stark contrast to the bland, artificial aromas that once drifted from David's now empty establishment. My heart swelled as I saw so many familiar faces, their smiles genuine, their appreciation clear and heartfelt. This was the true Della's Delights, reborn from the ashes of betrayal, stronger and more authentic than ever before. I stood behind the counter, my hands dusted with flour, the familiar rhythm of greeting customers, taking orders, and handing over warm loaves, bringing a sense of deep contentment, a homecoming for my soul. This wasn't about revenge in the bitter sense. It was about the sweet revenge of success, of proving that integrity triumphs over greed and that true quality cannot be faked or manufactured. A few weeks later, a letter arrived, tucked discreetly into my mailbox. It was from David. He wrote about his bankruptcy, about losing everything, about his strained relationship with Tiffany, who had left him shortly after the court ruling, unable to cope with their financial ruin. His tone was subdued, tinged with a profound regret, devoid of the arrogance that had defined him for so long. He spoke of realizing the depth of his mistakes, of how he had been blinded by ambition and had truly undervalued what I had built, what was truly important. He apologized sincerely for the pain he had caused, for the disrespectful way he had treated me, and for trying to erase my legacy, for trying to turn my life's work into a mere commodity. He even mentioned visiting Della's home baked, anonymously, one quiet afternoon, and how the taste of the sourdough bread had brought tears to his eyes, reminding him of his childhood, of simpler, happier times. I read the letter slowly, my heart a complex mix of sadness for his downfall and a faint, fragile sense of healing. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, perhaps never, but it was a step, a recognition of truth. He was acknowledging his errors, truly seeing me, Della, for the first time in years, not as an obstacle or a relic, but as the woman who had nurtured him, taught him, and ultimately defeated him with the strength of her convictions. Perhaps, with time, he would truly understand the meaning of legacy, not as a financial asset or a corporate empire, but as a living connection to something deeper, something rooted in love, hard work, and unwavering authenticity. Life moved on, filled with the comforting rhythms of baking, the joyous camaraderie of my staff, and the warmth of a loyal, supportive community. Della's home baked became a beloved fixture, a testament to resilience and the enduring power of quality, a place where people felt not just fed but cared for. I was no longer just the matriarch of a bakery. I was a symbol of quiet strength, a woman who had seemingly lost everything only to reclaim it, not through grand gestures or corporate maneuvers, but through the simple, honest act of baking. My hands, once weary from battling betrayal, now moved with a renewed purpose, kneading new beginnings into every loaf, every pastry, every sweet taste of my well-earned revenge. The sweetness was all mine, baked with passion, served with dignity, and savored with the profound joy of a life truly reclaimed, a legacy lovingly restored.